Go.
Merry Popcast, everybody. Here we are once again. It's the holiday season, and we've watched another movie, and we've got a lot of things to say about it. Not only are we going to talk about that movie, but there's a surprise gift exchange a little bit later in the hour. And we are also going to look at the year that was 2014. Well, let's get right to it. The movie this time out is Lethal Weapon, a Christmas movie, actually. We decided to choose a Christmas-themed movie, and Lethal Weapon leapt right to the top of the list. We figure most people know about Lethal Weapon, but maybe not everybody. So, as always, we're going to start off with a spirited reading of the plot. Jim Tallman, start us off, please.
Upon turning 50, L.A. detective Richard Murtaugh is assigned a new partner, the suicidal, angst-ridden, loose-cannon Martin Riggs. With a seeming death wish, Riggs is indispensable in catching criminals, but a potential liability to his partner.
Murtaugh, a conservative family man, and Riggs, a recent widower, form the prototypical buddy cop odd couple. Bickering at first, they soon form a close friendship and hit the streets to combat the LA crime scene.
They are assigned to investigate the death of a prostitute who happens to be the daughter of Murtaugh's old army buddy. The men behind the crime are part of the Shadow Company, a gang of drug-dealing Vietnam veterans led by retired General Peter McAllister.
The General's chief enforcer is the mysterious and violent Mr. Joshua. After the bad guys kidnap Murtaugh's teen daughter, things get personal and violence ensues.
So I guess my first question to the group is, does the plot even matter in this movie? Is this movie about plot, or is it just about, like, individual scenes and characterization? Eston, what do you think?
I think they could have done any other plot and just had still, like, the jumping scene and the 15 gun in the mouth scenes and all that stuff, and had, like, the cool
Christmas tree scene.
Yeah, like, all that stuff could have still been in any other movie. So just the fact that they did drug dealing Vietnam guys, it doesn't really matter.
Bob Mobley, does the plot matter to this movie?
There was a plot. I don't know. I've seen this movie about 1,500 times, and I was
That's a
actually
lot.
I was not
That's a
aware
lot.
that there was a plot in the film. And in fact, as I watched it this time as an adult, I was shocked to see like the story follow on through and actually come to the conclusion that I really didn't remember in the past.
Yeah.
I just remembered a lot of really just kinetic violence when I watched it back in the 80s. And so to actually follow it as an adult and see that there was an actual story kind of shocked me.
One of the things that I realized is I actually saw the movie in the theater when it first came out, and really, really enjoyed it. And then what I realize is every time since then, I've never watched the entire movie. It's one of those kind of HBO movies where I've
Yeah.
watched like the first half, I don't know, about 1,500 times, but
Right.
a whole lot of times, but I never really make it past the first half. I enjoy a lot of the first half, and then I'm like totally done. Jim, you didn't see this in the theater. You've only seen it on television, so now that you sat down and kind of watched the theatrical release, give us some thoughts. Was that a different experience for you?
It certainly is a different experience. It's one thing to watch it on Saturday afternoon and on television, and another to watch it, as it was released in the theaters. So it definitely has a different vibe. The violence hits you much more in this version than it does on the television. It's much more adult themed than it is teenager driven, as I thought it was when I was a teenager watching it on television. So it definitely stark difference.
Eston, when, where, how did you see this movie for the first time?
I really think it was maybe just 2 years ago. It was $2 at Half Price Books,
Yeah.
and I picked it up.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good example of like a movie they don't make anymore, like the hard R movie.
Yeah.
'Cause now every action movie, better than they didn't have PG-13, but now PG-13 is the way you go if you want to make any kind of action movie because you can get more people to come see your movie.
Yeah.
Though I'm not so sure this movie would be R if it was made in
Today.
2014.
And the language would get it, I think.
Really?
The language is pretty rough. I think the opening scene maybe does it. I don't know exactly what the qualifiers are to make it an R anymore, but I think maybe the nudity and the language would be enough to do it, but I'm not totally sure.
The number of F-bombs for sure, and that is something that's quantifiable, I think, by the MPAA. Like
yeah.
the number of times that you have the F word in a movie qualifies it as an R.
So this is our podcast, and we want to apply professional development, insurgent professional development, to whatever extent we possibly can. So even if there's not a plot, I'd like to know what kind of context and what kind of themes there are. So we're taking a look at the MYP Global Context List, and we're going to try to apply that, if we can, to the movie. And so let's just, for the audience, remind them what we're looking at. Here are our choices: identities and relationships, orientation in time and space, personal and cultural expression, scientific and technical innovation, globalization and sustainability, and finally, fairness and development. So let me throw it out to the group. Somebody take it, give me one of these, and tell me how possibly Lethal Weapon might fit one of our MYP global context categories.
I think it's a pretty big of a relationship movie.
Tell us about that.
You see the difference between, or the effect that a relationship could have on just a person's like stability, I guess. You see Roger's whole, family man, and how that kind of affects the way he does his job, the way he goes about his life. And you see Riggs, who lost his wife, and how that has taken him to a whole dark place that defines his character, I guess.
Yeah, orientation in time and space, or I'm sorry, identities and relationships, certainly. Orientation in time and space, though, works in certain areas when you think of personal histories,
Yeah.
because these guys' histories kind of define, what happens, the sequence of events that happens to the movie. It's all very much connected to Vietnam. Vietnam is a turning point for all of the major characters in this film. And so it may be a bit of a stretch, but I think orientation in time and space works for this film, too.
Something that stuck out at me that they showed multiple times, I'd have to watch it again to actually count, but there's a big sticker on the side of their refrigerator. I don't know if you guys saw this. It said, I would say, "End Apartheid Now." I think that's what the bumper sticker said.
Yeah.
And they make that political point. They never say anything about it,
Right.
but they go out of their way to make sure that this bumper sticker, this sign, is a focal point of it. There's nothing else in the house that you see except the Christmas tree, the dinner table, and then the refrigerator with this big, huge sign on the side. So I was thinking about that. That really kind of goes with the whole idea of orientation, time, and space. And is that the new Vietnam?
Right.
Because this movie is Vietnam based. All these, like you said, all these guys come from Vietnam. So is apartheid the new American war?
That's interesting, and this will come up a little bit later as we do our character studies and our MYP profiles on both the actors and the characters. But the interesting story behind that is Danny Glover is a political activist to the extreme, and that was one of his major areas of involvement, was personal friends with Nelson Mandela, and that's why that sticker is there. And actually, he uses this movie. One of his reasons for becoming involved in the movie was to try to, in addition to thinking that it was just sort of fun and entertaining and he'd make money, he freely admits that, but he also thought that it would raise awareness of the Vietnam veterans and their plight, and so there's a political activist nature to it, and that sticker that you're talking about is there for a very purposeful reason. I think that both of what you are, the two ones that you chose really, really do work well together, and I like that interconnectedness. All these guys were interconnected, Riggs and Murtaugh and McAllister, and I assume Joshua, they're all coming out of that Vietnam experience and how historical events will shape what is happening today. All right, that works real well. Let's continue with our MYP. We're looking now on our outline, and we're looking for the concepts that we think work real well. We're looking at things like change, culture, identity, perspective, and so on. Anything there? We've talked about relationships and time, place, and space. Any of those others work well for you as a significant concept that could apply to this movie?
I like identity. I think one of the long-lasting themes, if you will, of the movie is the sanity of Riggs. And I think if anybody in this movie is sane, I think I may have asked it later on, if anybody in this movie is sane, I think Riggs, of all of them, is the most sane. I think he more than anybody else in this movie, truly understands himself. He understands his own identity, who he is, where he has been, and where he's going. And I think that's part of the reason that he is suicidal, because I think it scares him. His identity was of a loving husband, and that identity was taken from him in a car accident. And so he knows exactly who he is, and I think it scares him.
we're going to jump around a lot, and that's totally fine. There will be areas that overlap with one another, and you've raised a very interesting point. I also like the thing about the identity of Riggs. One of those famous lines is where he says, "When I was 19, I did a guy in Laos." And you can tell that that's not the first time that he said that. That anecdote, that event, that was his identity. He says that's the only thing that I ever really did that was good. And so that was his identity. And then the loving husband was his identity. And now he's this guy that's at odds with himself. So that works really well, as identity is a significant concept.
And I think that dovetail well with the key concept of communities, because the one thing he says, that the one thing that keeps him going every day is the job, right, is serving his community and the job that he does for the police department. And so I think that fits in well with communities. I think communities is a key concept in here, because these guys are public servants. They see themselves as public servants, even though they're doing it through, what's seemingly random acts of violence and exceeding violence. But I think that ties well with communities. I think that what Riggs' new identity is as a public servant, especially as you go forward into the other movies.
I like that a lot, and I think if you look at this letter E, that's something I wanted to discuss in terms of community, so I'm glad that that was brought up. The police are a part of the community, and so what we're looking at here is the idea from this movie of the role and the image of police in society, and I thought that we could use that as a jumping off point to talk about that in the world at large. And throughout this podcast, I'm going to tell you, I was disturbed a little bit by the movie because Eston had suggested that we watch the director's cut, which I had never watched before. And I ended up not even being able to finish that. I went back to the theatrical release, and in particular there was a scene that, and we can talk about it later, but it dealt with school violence. And I don't usually have a sort of visceral reaction to a movie like this, but I actually did. And so I wanted to kind of almost cleanse my palate. And throughout this podcast, I went and I found some Gandhi quotes that actually sort of relate to things that come up. And so let me use one right now as we talk about the role and the image of police in society. Gandhi said, if I can find this, "You must not lose faith in humanity. Humanity is an ocean. If a few drops of the ocean are dirty, the ocean does not become dirty." Let's talk about police in society, and whether it's in this movie or in the world at large. You talked, Bob, about the seemingly random acts of violence. Is that fair? What do we think about the police? Are we having a positive view of them right now, or are we kind of on edge? Eston, go ahead.
It is kind of the hot issue, I guess these days. I think that quote, though, is almost exactly what I was going to say. Like, whatever job or group of people you want to look at, there's going to be people who are good, and there are people who are bad. And right now it seems like you turn on the news, you turn on the internet or whatever, it's just like every single cop is out to get every single, anybody. Which it's not true. Like, there are bad cops, just like there are bad doctors and bad politicians and bad anything, right? But there's a lot more, I think, good police officers who want to do the job the right way and aren't out to get somebody. And I think, obviously there's conversations that need to be had, but part of me thinks that we're not doing it the right way. Like, I don't know.
I think so much damage has been done in terms of PR for the police all across the country right now that it's going to take forever for them to kind of recover their image. And I don't know how they do it. I heard someone say the other day, think of all the people who are arrested in this country every day, all across this country, without violence, without being shot or beat up or choked or whatever. And that's, those things aren't recorded. That's not what's on the news. What's on the news is the violence, because that gets people's attention.
Robin Alexander,
Please
you're
pardon
live
this
and waiting
interruption.
at door 1. Robin Alexander, report to door 1, ASAP.
ASAP. Jim, as you get ready to respond, I also want you to take into account this statement, if you could react to this. The police cause more problems than they solve.
I think it's really easy to scapegoat the police. I think the two professions that are scapegoated the most, I think, are teachers and policemen. Because we are the ones that have our boots on the ground. We're the ones that deal with the everyday common folk every single day, and nobody else really does. Politicians don't. Doctors don't.
Yeah.
No, we deal with them every day, and I think it's really easy to blame us and policemen for what ails society. Teachers have created a society of criminals because we don't produce productive citizens. and then police cannot successfully interact with these criminals that teachers have created. And I think that's an unfortunate situation. Like Eston was saying, there's always a rotten apple, and unfortunately, as far as the news is concerned, that rotten apple has spilled the bunch. But I would bet that if you asked, 1,000 normal, educated, employed adults their perspective of police, it would be overall positive. CNN wants to sell commercial time, and they sell commercial time by showing, the one bad apple in New York or Missouri or whatever it was. And I think what's lost in this is the fact, as you said, that the police are there to protect and to serve. And I think for the most part they do that. What about the fact that there are criminals on the street? We're not hearing about those guys.
Yeah.
We're hearing about the police. Okay, there's an event in Missouri. Why is it international news? What about how many policemen have died on duty since the Ferguson event? I haven't heard about a single one, but I bet you there have been tens. But we don't hear about that.
In many ways, the Ferguson event is almost a product of cable news. Cable news created Ferguson. And social media, I think. Social media has played a huge role in creating this image of the police as being brutal all the time, particularly toward minorities, particularly toward African Americans. And so I think I don't want to say it's all cable news and social media, but they've definitely shaped the image for sure.
And part of me just gets frustrated because they talk about they want to fix all these problems, but then really these problems are the symptoms of the actual problems of uneven distribution of wealth, broken families, all this stuff. That's where we should be getting mad at and pointing our fingers at it. But it's easier to say, white cop hates black kid.
And
shoots
by
him
the
in
way,
head.
what you've done there is bring up some other of our MYP concepts, disparity and equity and resources. So again, nice application point. Anybody else on this issue? Let me ask you this, and as we continue to try to search for some themes in the movie, teamwork. Is that worth talking about? Is this a good example of teamwork? Is that something worth analyzing and discussing from this movie?
Well, I think teamwork actually jumps out at this a lot because when they first are put together, they are anything but a team. But what happens in the end is there are two faulted men. They have their faults, as we all have faults. But I think what happens is they put those faults behind them. They accept each other for who they are, and together they apply that. And I think the last scene is, and as you'd mentioned that you'd forgotten about, the fight scene at the end, where all the policemen show up and Murtaugh says, no, Riggs has got it, let him take care of it. And then Riggs thinks he takes care of it, but in the end he hasn't taken care of it. And then who saves the day? Actually, both of them together when they both grab their Smith & Wesson and take care of business.
Another way
Is that a Smith & Wesson?
I'm not sure.
I think he said it was.
I'll have to check the
Maybe.
database. Oh yeah,
a
yeah,
six-shooter.
4-inch Smith,
Yeah.
6-shooter, right? I think another way that teamwork is illustrated in this movie, like the evolution of their teamwork and their friendship, is through the driving.
Yeah.
He's always saying, Riggs, you're suicidal, you can't drive, I'll drive.
Yeah.
And then finally at the end, Riggs gets to drive,
Yeah.
right? And that shows like the transition of trust that that Murtaugh's
That's a
now
great
imparted
point.
on.
I like that too, where Riggs at one point is riding in the car and he thinks that Murtaugh is driving a little too crazy, and he's like, "You're about to kill us." And even though he's suicidal, actually, let's talk about suicide as a theme. And in fact, it's another Gandhi quote here. Gandhi says, "If I had no sense of humor, I would long ago have committed suicide." Let's apply that to Riggs. Does his sense of humor save him? Because he's a guy who watches cartoons, he does the Three Stooges
True.
stuff, he's
Yeah.
always making jokes.
Even when he's there, when he's suicidal and he points the gun at his head, and he's got the picture of his wife there, and he says, "I'll see you later,"
Yeah.
and he tosses the thing. So yeah, maybe humor is what kind of keeps him grounded in the real world.
It's a movie that's mostly about suicide. Is that a big theme for this movie, or is it incidental to it?
I think it's just, I don't know. I think it's just one more way to show, or I don't know. It's not about informing you or getting you to sympathize or understand suicide.
No. Is it a big part of Riggs's identity, though?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's part of what the filmmakers used to make him a lethal weapon. His desperation, his
like
not
a
caring.
superpower.
Yeah, it's like a superpower almost. I mean, it's what makes him a lethal weapon for good or for bad. And so, yeah, I think suicide is definitely a tool that the filmmakers are using to develop the character for sure.
It's almost as if through this movie he's attempting to commit suicide in slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
We every once in a while see him with the gun to the head and all of that, but really it's those other actions, those day-to-day actions that seem so reckless and
The jumper, the school shooter,
Yeah.
the things like that, where he purposefully puts himself in harm's way, recklessly, yeah.
No, I didn't like the jumper scene.
Oh, I like.
really, tell us why.
I would have liked to
Love
have
hear that.
known because it has you on the edge of your seat. It's one of those where like, oh really, oh really,
The balloon
And
at the
that big
bottom.
huge balloon at the bottom. Like, oh
Yeah.
really?
It's cheap, I think, in a way. It took a really intense scene and
Yeah.
cheapened it
Yeah.
at the end.
I don't like the end of it, but I do like his dialogue with the guy. Again,
Do you really want to jump?
Yeah, and he's like, I know you're hurting, and he's like
Yeah.
trying to empathize
Yeah.
with the guy. I mean, but you're right. That part at the end, one of the things, and I was watching some commentary stuff that drove me nuts, is one guy says, "Yeah, it's really kind of stupid because when they jump, their handcuffs come apart." Well, idiot, they're not. When they jump,
There's
they don't even
rubber
have the
stunt
handcuffs.
handcuffs
Well, they don't
or
even
whatever.
have them on
Yeah.
because they can't jump that way. But they do then. The stuntmen grab each other's hands and go down, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, in that sense, I think that's a really good point. That the big balloon thing sort of,
It's cheap.
yeah.
But I think that scene, though, on the ledge, I think that shows why Gibson, part of the reason Gibson became such a superstar in the mid-'80s, because he's really intense there. He shows
He's
empathy.
awesome in this entire movie.
Yeah, I mean, he's great. I mean, this is the beginning of the kind of the pinnacle of his career.
I'm going to agree that he's great, and I'm going to go even further and say there's surprisingly great performances all around. Danny Glover is great in a different way, in an understated way, and frankly, and we'll hear more about this later, Gary Busey is great
Yeah.
in this movie. He truly is.
We have. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's all right. I was going to say we can come back to that. But let's do this just for a moment since we're still on this theme of themes and teamwork. Had this other quote, and this is not from Gandhi. This is from the guy who started the Honda Motor Company, and his name is Soichiro Honda, and he says, "Action without philosophy is a lethal weapon." And I wanted to apply that to action movies in general. Is it dangerous to create action movies that have no sort of philosophy or meaning behind them? Is that a problem? Is that something that could threaten parts of society? Is that part of this thing where we say there's this puerile violence in movies that is leading to violent behavior in the society? Do we need them to have meaning, or is it okay just to enjoy a violent movie?
So does violence in movie lead to violence in society?
Yeah.
I think it's the opposite.
Okay.
I think movies reflect the violence that's already in society. So our movies and our books, our fiction really reflects the violence that we're organically producing for whatever reason. And so I don't think movies produce violence. I think violence produces violence in movies.
Okay.
I think one pushes. Reality pushes the art pushes back on reality. It keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Now, violence without a story or without a purpose, I think that's video games in the 21st century. You know, violence in movies almost always has some kind of a story. There has to be some kind of story to sell the movie. But violence without a story, I think that's modern day video games, first person shooter games, and that sort of thing. Maybe.
Jim, what do you think?
Well, we kind of had the discussion when we talked about
Scarface.
Scarface.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes. I think they go together.
Okay.
I think they're bedfellows. I think that's kind of hit on it. I think it's cyclical. One feeds the other. I think society drives it, yet is a product of it. I think what is kind of scary about something like this is, yeah, we are normal, whatever normal is, or we are sane. And the fun of this movie is about insanity. There are people out there that don't think the way that we would hope they would think, and so people can be motivated by something like this. And I think movies and I think video games, though your run-of-the-mill American is not going to be affected by that to the point where they're going to be driven to do something like that. But some people are. Some people are. There's always that rotten apple. And is this movie something that is can they affect change or lack thereof?
I like your connection to Scarface, and I even think I heard, whether you intended it or not, even a little bit of a connection to the Abbott and Costello, the monsters, the idea of what is normal, what is sane, and the search for that, and quite a bit of that happening, Riggs, Murtaugh, and Joshua in this movie as well. Let's say that we were going to try to put this movie into a genre category. And I realize that it crosses genres, but just for the sake of conversation, here's your choices. It's either an action movie, a comedy movie, a thriller, or a buddy movie. And just to start us off, choose one of those.
Just
Eston,
one?
if you had to choose one, what is it?
I don't know. I really think the buddy movie, inherent to that genre, is a comedy.
Okay.
Like, every buddy movie you see, there's something, at least something funny happening in it. And then I'm gonna say buddy movie, I guess.
Okay. Bob?
Buddy
cop.
movie.
Buddy cop.
As action.
Action? Okay.
I don't really think they're buddies. I mean, they're not
Oh.
buddies. They're not buddies until the end. You know,
Yeah.
they have to get there. Lethal Weapon 2, that's a buddy movie. You know, Lethal Weapon 1's not a buddy movie.
Okay.
You know, I'm not sure. What you said is correct. They're not buddies at the beginning and they're not until the end. But I'm not sure that a buddy movie can't be the progression or the evolution of a buddy
budding buddy
relationship.
movie.
A buddy movie.
I like that. I like that. You've really done something good there. React to this statement. This movie is basically an updated version of Abbott and Costello. We're taking the straight man, we're taking the comedian, we're putting them into a situation that you wouldn't normally think was comical. Any validity to this?
Well, in Abbott and Costello, like you said, you've got two opposites that have attracted, and that's what we have in this movie. I think in Abbott and Costello, they have to accept each other's faults to become one. That's exactly what happens here. They accept each other's faults to become one.
Eston?
Yes.
Ditto.
Pardon me, zoned out. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, this is a good point then for us to just move away from the movie for a moment. It's also, as we know, it's our holiday broadcast, and I don't know if I'm going to step on any toes here. We're going to talk a lot about Christmas, and I know there's other holidays that probably deserve just as much emphasis, but we don't really participate in those, so we're going to talk about Christmas. And the first thing that I wanted to do was spend just a moment asking you all if there were other Christmas movies or TV Christmas specials that you were fond of, that you have special memories of, things that you enjoyed. Bob?
Oh, as a child, Christmas was never Christmas until we saw Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Charlie Brown Christmas.
Yeah.
Probably others are those other kind of stop motion animatronic
Oh.
things that we used to watch. Year Without a Santa Claus and all
I
that.
love that one. That's the one that's got Heat Miser.
Miser and-
That's probably my
Heat
favorite
Miser
one
and
right
Snow
there.
Miser, and back then we had to wait till they were on
Yeah.
and catch them. Now we just watch them whenever we
I
want.
love that. Jim, any memories?
To me, it's Die Hard.
Okay, yeah.
Die Hard is the ultimate Christmas movie.
It is a Christmas
It
movie.
is a Christmas movie.
I read online that Die Hard is set at Christmas because Lethal Weapon is.
That's
set at
right,
Christmas.
and in fact, a little bit later in the show, let's do a head-to-head competition between Die Hard and Lethal Weapon.
That'll be
That's great.
tough.
Like,
Yeah, that is
I had
tough.
completely forgotten that. Like, maybe I didn't even know that Lethal Weapon was a Christmas movie itself.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But Die Hard, to me, is the ultimate Christmas experience.
I'll throw one out there, and I don't know if this is one that I love, but it's one that we always watched, and I'm going to make a comparison here and ask you to react to it. I was thinking about It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Christmas movie, and frankly, it's a suicide movie. What's the deal with suicide at Christmas? I mean,
Isn't that one of the things that's
Oh
a
yeah,
high point in the year for?
yeah. For suicides, people with depression, it really turns on at
Riggs
Christmas time.
speaks to that in the jump scene. He says, especially during the silly season.
Especially he does indeed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he says it straight up. So that's one that I'll throw out there. What for you? What movies or TV shows?
I always like Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's more Halloween or more Christmas, but
It's a little bit.
it's one of those ones that I've bought in like 4 different formats just because it's one of the ones you have to have.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Before we go back to the movie, let's spend another moment on Christmas. A favorite Christmas treat, if you've got one. Like if you love fruitcake, this is the time to reveal that. If you really enjoy drinking lukewarm eggnog, this is the time to say it. Or if there's anything else, Jim.
My favorite Christmas treat is Christmas music.
Yeah.
I mean, from Thanksgiving through New Year's, I guess. All you will only hear coming from my radio is Christmas music.
True story.
And it's really funny to me. Where else? I mean, in no other realm or sphere would I be listening to Nat King Cole and enjoying it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
or
really?
any of these guys. You know, half these guys I never even
Bing
heard of.
Crosby.
Dean Martin.
I mean, yeah, you know, but here I am, loving every moment of it. Have it playing in the car, have it playing at home.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a treat, even though it's really. It's not anything. It doesn't relate to me. I mean, that's not. I'm a death metal guy.
Sure.
You know, I literally have like death metal Christmas music that I
Well, a
listen to
little bit later,
sometimes,
let's talk about our favorite Christmas songs. Let's do that. Bob, how about Christmas treats for you?
Eggnog. It's
Truly,
Christmas.
you
Yeah,
like it?
eggnog at Christmas time. Yep, eggnog.
Can I ask a question?
I never really got into eggnog.
I don't even really know what eggnog is.
Yeah, tell us about
I
it.
have the slightest idea what it is, but I do drink it. So I think it's kind of a milkish thing with egg.
Yeah.
It just doesn't sound
And
appealing.
Now, what's nog?
Human.
Could you have like
Human?
corn nog or something? Could you
I'm not
make
sure.
another kind of nog?
I don't know what the nog is. Now, don't make me look at the ingredients because I'm
Yeah.
going to stop
Be
drinking it.
disgusting. I'm not a big fan of eggs, and so what I've always kind of figured this was, I always kind of figured it was like spoiled milk with an egg in it and stirred up. And maybe I'm wrong.
Thanks.
I just when I think of eggnog, I just picture Christmas Vacation and Chevy Chase and Randy Quaid standing over the eggnog. Just
Yeah.
oh, that's
another Christmas
hilarious.
movie.
That is another good Christmas movie. I find, maybe I don't appreciate eggnog. I know that Steak and Shake right now has eggnog milkshakes. Is that something you're interested in?
No, I'd rather just drink the eggnog, but now I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
Since
You ever
guys-
drink it right out of the carton?
You guys have ruined it for me. No, never.
Well, that's another
He's not
thing.
a savage.
That's another thing I didn't even know about. So, like, do you buy it in a carton, pour it in a glass, or is it something you make in your home and like stir up in an alchemical kind
I
of
think
way?
people make it at home, but I get the Dean's version,
To Golden
the
there
Dean's
somewhere?
Court version. I never drink out of it. At least not. I don't drink out of the carton unless especially if my wife's
Nobody
looking.
else's home.
Is it thick?
It is.
It's thick,
It is a
okay.
thick. And
It's a
thicker
rum drink,
consistency.
isn't it?
Is it? I don't know.
Eggnog has rum in it.
People do add
after the
alcohol
fact,
to it.
yeah.
Folks do.
Folks,
Not that I would.
Could you put like Coca-Cola in it? Would that work?
I suppose you could. I don't know why you would, but
can
you
you,
could.
can you like have eggnog ice cream?
Yeah, I
They
think
have
they're-
because it's an eggnog milkshake.
Oh, I
at
guess
Steak
you're
and
right.
Shake
But that's
now,
like
yeah.
coffee ice cream.
Yeah.
Just drink coffee.
Yeah, I don't know that
understand.
it's a good idea, but they got it, that's for sure. Let's do MYP learner profiles applied to different players in the movie. Eston, you're going to
Yo.
tell us about Richard Donner and Shane Black, and you're going to apply MYP terminology to them.
All right. For my section, I looked up the writer and the director of this movie. And so Shane Black is the writer. And so for him, I went communicator because he has this style that he writes the scripts in. Like, I don't know. I haven't read, like, movie scripts for fun, but his is very, 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 like, it just, you picture it in your mind. It's more like reading, like, a book or a novel than it is reading, like,
It's like
a
he's right
movie
there in the
script.
room with you.
It's fantastic. And so he's written a ton of stuff. He wrote Lethal Weapon 1 and 2, Last Boy Scout, Last Action Hero, Long Kiss Goodnight, Kiss Kiss
That's
Bang
good.
Bang, Iron Man 3.
That's good.
And a lot of those are also Christmas movies. And a lot of them are also buddy cop movies or action movies.
Even Iron Man
definitely-
3 is a buddy movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I think just the way he writes, and I'm not going to read this
That's fine.
whole thing, but if you look it up online, just read the first scene. And it talks about the girl, and it describes her, and it talks about, she's dropping, and this part didn't make it in the movie, at least the one I saw, but she talks about how she's dropping potted plants and nailing cars.
Yeah.
And it talks about how, in the beginning, her description, the last thing he says is, she is beautiful. And then it talks about her jumping off the edge, and he says, she jumps the railing, plummets head over heels like a rag doll, hits the yellow car spot on. She lies dead like an extinguished dream, still beautiful. And I was
That's
like,
pretty nice.
that's that's exactly what the movie
It's like
looks like.
almost like an Elmore Leonard
Yeah.
kind of a narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. I
He
like
also
that.
puts in like little jokes like to the people reading it. So like if he's trying to get you to buy the script, like he put in like he's like shot opens on house or something like that. This is the kind of house that I will buy if you buy this script, and I am rich. And he goes through and describes everything.
I think that's interesting because you know that it's, without knowing anything about it, it's got to be just this ridiculously competitive business. And so doing something to set yourself apart, as you talked about that made me think that there's an application teaching. It's the same kind of thing in your classroom. We could all do it just exactly the same way, kind of this cookie cutter approach, and that wouldn't be any good at all. But to do something like this, where you make it unique, where you make it grab, where you make it visceral, we can be doing that in the classroom just like he does in his script
Yep.
writing.
For Richard Donner, I went with knowledgeable
Mm-hmm.
because I looked back at his filmography,
Mm-hmm.
and he has made some movies that people love, but they're all in different types. They're all in different genres. So like this man knows how to put together a movie. He's very knowledgeable. He's The Omen, Superman, the original Superman, and then he got fired off of Superman 2, but
Yeah.
that's a different story. The Goonies, which is
That's an awesome
awesome.
movie.
All 4 Lethal Weapons, and Scrooged.
Oh, that's a
with,
great movie.
With
There's a
Bill
Christmas
Murray.
movie.
Yeah, so I mean, and he even wrote comic books and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Comedy, horror, action.
action, kids, adventure movie. So yeah, he can do it all. He knows what he knows.
Some
his,
modern
way
day
around
Howard
the lens.
Hawks.
Yeah, very good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Jim, Gary Busey, not Mr. Joshua. Can you tell us about Gary Busey and apply some NYP profile to it?
I said he was a risk taker.
Okay.
He's certainly an interesting fellow, to say
Okay.
the least. He actually dropped out of college with 1 class to go. He had never
Wow.
been an actor. He never even thought about acting. And then he took a class in acting in college and liked it. And he transferred to, I believe it was Oklahoma State, to pursue acting. And then with 1 class to go, dropped out, did not get his degree. He always seems to play an energetic, odd, and almost psychotic characters,
Yeah.
interestingly enough. And though in this movie he was psychotic yet grounded. I don't know
Oh
if that makes
yeah.
any sense.
No, it
but-
does.
He was more normal in the movie than he is in real life.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Right. Though in many of the characters he plays, he doesn't seem to know what's going on around him. Like he's focused on whatever his goal is.
Yeah.
For example, in Under Siege, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Point Break. He's actually in The Firm too, and in all these characters he plays.
Forgot he was.
Forgot he was in the firm.
I
Yeah.
almost feel like he's one of those guys that he's not an actor. Like he doesn't act when he's acting.
He's
always
being
Gary
himself.
Busey.
Right,
Yeah,
he's being
yeah.
Gary
He's
Busey.
a
You guys
method
know about
actor.
Will Smith?
He does the same thing on television. He was on The Apprentice, where he did the same exact guy.
Yeah.
It was him. He has his son Jake.
Yeah.
Who's him? It's him.
It's him.
It's him as a younger version of him that's
great.
following in his footsteps. He almost died in a motorcycle accident.
Wasn't wearing a helmet, was he?
About a decade ago. Almost died in an accident, and he has had a very, very, very bad drug habit, especially with cocaine. He's had overdose issues.
Yeah.
And
He's an on the edge guy.
right, and that cocaine habit kind of fits his personality. That's just on the edge, frenetic
Yeah.
type of guy, and that's exactly what we see. We can see a burgeoning frenetic guy in Mr. Joshua.
Now, talking about Danny Glover now, I will say for him that he is caring and open-minded. One of the things that's interesting about Danny Glover to me is that in some ways he is exactly who he appears to be on the screen, except that he's way more liberal. So like in this movie, and we'll talk about Roger Murtaugh later, but that's a very conservative family man. Danny Glover is a very grounded, very solid person, but he's very liberal, and he's a major activist, and we talked about apartheid, and he goes from, he's a major advocate of a living wage for workers. His parents were both postal workers, and so he's been awarded many times like the UAW Service Award, and he's very outspoken about that sort of thing. He is dyslexic, and so he does a lot of educational foundation kinds of things, and so major activist, been arrested multiple times, speaks his mind. So while solid and grounded, came out and said George W. Bush is a racist, came out and said Barack Obama is a failure, just speaks his mind and really lets the cards fall where they may. Very active in the NAACP, both his parents and himself were. So yeah.
Is he still alive?
Danny
Is he in
Glover,
his
yeah.
80s?
I don't know. He was
he-
actually 40 in this movie where he plays
where he plays a
50.
50-year-old.
As
Was
far
he just
as,
in The Butler like 2 years ago?
I didn't see that.
That's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah, I've heard
So
good
he's
things.
early mid-60s now.
Yeah.
So this movie was 1987, and he was 40 in 1987.
I'm not good at math. I'm a social studies
Well,
teacher.
he's
that's
65,
27.
mid-60s.
That's 87 is
So it's set 27 years ago.
27 years ago.
So he's 60. He's 67.
He's
if he was
67
40.
years old. Yeah.
Okay.
He is alive because I realize this now. They are, and we can talk about this a little bit later, but they're talking about doing a reboot of the Lethal Weapon
Right.
movies, and they asked him to comment on that, and what he thought about that. All right, so let's hear about Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson, what I like to call the rise and fall of Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson is just a train wreck, isn't he?
How do you really feel?
He's born in New York City.
Isn't he, folks?
He's actually not in New York City. I'm sorry. He's born in New York. His grandmother is from Australia. His mother is Irish. He still has dual citizenship.
I did not realize this.
Yeah, he's got a really multinational family. His dad gets some kind of a settlement when Mel is 12 years old. Gets a settlement of a sizable amount of money back then, $120,000. Moves the family to Australia, which is where Mel grows up. That's why he's got the accent. And you know he does really well in the early '80s. In the '80s in film, Mad Max comes out in '79. He's clearly a rising star. Gallipoli shows that he's got some really deep, dramatic acting chops, right? And then really Lethal Weapon is considered to be the thing that really shoots him to superstardom. And so in 1987, he goes on after that to make Braveheart, where he wins Best Director. And then, of course, comes The Passion of the Christ, which is a modern-day passion play. And it does spectacularly well. No one wants to finance it, so he puts up his own money, which is why he makes all the money. And then Mel Gibson loses his mind. After 2004, when The Passion of the Christ comes out, he divorces his wife. They've got like 9 children, something like that.
Is she famous?
She's not,
Okay.
but he's always been known up until this point as a family man,
Okay.
right? 9 kids, devoted to his wife. He is, his politics and his religion are very much interconnected, both ultra-conservative, more Catholic than the Pope is, how he's described oftentimes.
Wow.
His father is a Holocaust denier. I think Mel Gibson is on record as being a Holocaust denier as well. And so certainly pretty controversial there.
So he makes Tom Cruise look sane.
He does make Tom Cruise look like someone, that you'd want your daughter to bring home.
He's less angry than Tom Cruise.
But the same
Or he's
height.
more angry than Tom
More
Cruise.
angry than Tom Cruise, and he's on tape
Yeah.
Yes.
as being more angry on multiple times when he was talking to his girlfriend and she recorded him. Showing there were battery charges. He was arrested. He's a member of this really elite Hollywood club with really awesome mugshots. He's recorded there where he's calling the cop a Jew and blaming the Jews for all the problems of the world. And so this is the mid to late 2000s when all this stuff is happening. So.
Can I ask the question?
Yeah.
Because all this stuff popped to my mind when I saw him in this movie. Because in this movie, he's fantastic. Like
He
he's the
is.
most entertaining thing on the screen.
Mhm.
Awesome. And then you know that there's this other side, this thing that he's a horrible person.
Yeah.
And I'm having this problem right now with Bill Cosby, because
Okay.
he is, I guess maybe was, somebody I like, a hero.
Sure.
All right. Like me and my friend, like in elementary school, would just come over to my house. We're gonna listen to Bill Cosby records.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
That's hilarious.
that's why we didn't have any friends. But I think it shaped up so much of what I think is funny.
This is you and Will.
No, not Will. But like, I mean, the Cosby Show. Like, I love the Cosby Show. Me and my wife went to go see him live a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. And then you find out that he's actually a terrible, terrible human being.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, because it bugged me, and what I've gotten to the point now is like, Bill Cosby might be a horrible, horrible person. Allegedly. But Cliff Huxtable never did anything wrong.
That's right.
Like, I can still, I don't think,
So you're
feel guilty.
compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
I think I have to, because I don't want to not have that.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. I have to tell you this, though, and of course I've told you this before. My family, just as a tradition, and we've been doing this for years now, every Sunday night we watch one episode of The Cosby Show and one episode of Leave It to Beaver. And we've done that now for years, working our way through the entire catalog of both of those shows. And when this started to come out, because I'd never even heard any of these allegations until just these last several weeks, my wife was like, so are we going to continue to watch The Cosby Show? And I said just exactly what you just said. I was like, you know what, that's not the character on the show. I mean, I have no idea most of the time what actors are doing in their real lives, so it doesn't bother me. We then sat down that week or the following week and we watched The Cosby Show, and I had to get up and walk out of the room because watching him interact with the young female actresses, I could not abide it.
Wow.
made me
interesting.
just angered me beyond
Yeah.
belief.
And that may be a very typical reaction to people who loved him, in the 80s.
And I haven't watched it since. But I don't want to not have that available.
Yeah,
I feel
it's
like,
a shame.
and I'm not gonna, with a paintbrush, paint everybody in Hollywood this way, but I feel like the Tom Cruises, the Mel Gibsons, the Bill Cosbys of the world, they feel like they're untouchable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times they are.
Yeah,
Well, he has been
Yeah.
for
right. Obviously.
however long.
And so, and they feel because everybody has been at their beck and call, bowing to them ever since he made Lethal Weapon, ever since Tom Cruise made Top Gun.
Yeah.
Ever since Bill Cosby did the Cosby Show, they've been able to do anything and everything they could have possibly ever wanted, and no one would ever bother to say a word to them about it. And I feel there are a lot of people in Hollywood like that. Look at all the child stars.
Sure.
You know, they're great examples of this. You know, from the moment they were reared, they've been what they thought was God's gift to the world, and,
You're right.
and they're not. You know, Lindsay Lohan, great example.
Will
Or
Smith's kids.
who's
Awful.
the singer that went all nuts? So
Bieber.
no, the girl, the country singer that had the show on Disney. Her dad was Miley Cyrus.
Miley Cyrus.
You know, and it's
Hannah Montana.
and now of course what Miley Cyrus has done or what these other child stars have done is very different than what Bill Cosby has done.
Right.
But at the same time, I just feel like they're not all there because we've allowed them to be that way.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. And for me, with Bill Cosby, if you told me, and I'm saying this in a very hypothetical way, if instead the story had been Bill Cosby has been addicted to Vicodin for the last 30 years, that wouldn't mean anything to me. I feel
Right.
bad for him. They'd be fine.
Right.
If the story was, frankly, that he had cheated on his wife, which apparently he has, I'd be like, you know what? That's his business and that's his family, and I don't care. And so with the Lindsay Lohan and the Tom Cruise, and I don't know everything that they allegedly have done, but I think a lot of their stuff is much more self-destructive. This thing where supposedly he's used the drugs on the women, and
Yeah.
that's just, I mean, he's a predator if that stuff is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, that's different. That's definitely different. Now, you mentioned that you watched Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah.
Just not for nothing, Mel Gibson's last movie was The Beaver. In
Interesting.
2011, in which
Nice segue there.
in which directed by award-winning actress and director Jodie Foster.
And they're like weirdly like best friends in the world or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, I don't understand that relationship. There's something we'll have to dig into that and see. They must have been in a movie together.
Mel Gibson did
Live
Apocalypto,
Maverick.
didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
And so that one, I feel when the credits start in that movie, you're getting the idea that Catholicism saved Mesoamerica.
Yeah,
Is that the point?
I got that when I watched The Beaver. Actually,
really.
no, I didn't watch it.
So it's interesting. Well, let's do
I've never
this
seen it, so I don't know.
compartmentalizing of the actors and the characters. Let's spend a few moments with the characters, and Murtaugh I think is an easy one. If we're gonna put stereotypes on him, the kind of character that he is, he's a veteran cop. He's straight laced. He's a father figure. He's the good cop. He's a man. This is my take on Murtaugh. I think that he has everything to lose, and so he plays it safe, at least at the beginning of the movie. That's what he's come to. He's a Vietnam vet too, but he's this guy that's got the family, he's got the home, and he's just trying to ride it out. He doesn't want to upset anything. He just wants to get out, and then his world gets shocked with a man who has basically nothing to lose, Riggs. So what do you think Riggs' character, what kind of things would you say?
I thought he was an unhealthy risk taker, kind of like Scarface from that last two shows.
Yeah.
Just going out of his way to, at least at the beginning, to put himself in harm's way.
I think he accepted martyrdom. I think he was a thinker. He accepted martyrdom.
Catholic thing to say.
No, and that like in the opening scene when he goes and saves those kids, he was willing to die to save them. And you walk by all these cops. I remember he's walking up the steps and there's a woman cop laying on the steps, grabbing his pants, trying to stop him. Well, she's sitting there watching these kids get shot, and she's not willing to do anything about it. But he knows he can put an end to this right now by doing what he did.
It's a real indictment of the establishment, this movie, and that scene in particular, I think. And I don't know if I completely agree with it, you know. I don't know if I completely buy that the establishment, you know, isn't an appropriate way to deal with conflict. And this movie kind of says if you're the establishment, that doesn't work. But yeah, I think that raises a good point. You said earlier Riggs is the sanest character in the movie. Talk more about that.
I think sanity is understanding who you are and your surroundings and what's going on, and being able to make decisions based upon that. I truly believe he, more than anybody else in this movie, knows who he is, and he knows what needs to be done to accomplish his goals. And that's why I think that he's accepting of being a martyr. That's why he doesn't kill himself, because he does wake up every day knowing that this is the job that keeps him going. But it's the risks that he must undertake to fulfill that job. Is
That's
what makes him
interesting.
the sanest person in the movie.
He's
'Cause-
performing a service.
Right, you wouldn't see. I mean, Riggs or Murtaugh wouldn't do that. He wouldn't have walked out there.
No
one else in that movie except maybe Joshua
Yeah.
would have done what he did to save those children.
I think there are some commonalities in the approach of Joshua and Riggs, but clearly some differences as well. But I like also to try to tie this back to what you were saying about policemen and teachers in society. You know, all of this abuse and these risks, frankly, are placed upon them, and yet they're willing to stand in the breach. That's a great point. Anything about any of these other characters or other comments about the characters, Murtaugh, Riggs, or even Joshua?
Don't think so.
Let's do some more Christmas discussion. Your best Christmas gift ever, Eston.
I really don't know. Like,
We'll come back
it's
to
a
you.
cop-out.
All right, we'll come back to you. Bob, can you do it? Best
My,
Christmas
oh,
gift
my
ever?
best Christmas gift ever was a lightsaber that I got in 1980, I would guess. Approximately 1980, maybe 1979, and it was not like the ones they have now. It was a flashlight with a long tube, and I could insert a
Oh, wow.
blue or red disc
Oh, wow.
into where the lens of the flashlight was. So yeah, I had one of the first
And it had a
light
hilt,
up. Like,
like a-
it did not have an energized hilt, but that's coming. That's next.
Jim, best gift ever.
Well, I've got two.
Okay, that's
I've
fine.
got two. One is my daughter.
Yeah,
I have a
that's
daughter that
nice.
was born.
Was she born on Christmas?
I'd like to
No.
change my answer,
She
please.
was born a week before, but
That's
that's
all
a
right.
Christmas gift.
Yeah,
But
that's good.
as a kid, it was a Nintendo.
Okay.
It was just the full on regular
Original Nintendo?
Yeah, I can remember the
That's
box.
nice.
It's it's about 3 feet long, about 1.5 feet wide, about I don't know about 8 to 10 inches deep. Open it up and it has the pad that you run on, you know, and it has the gun because it came with Duck Hunt. Oh man, it was awesome. And Mario, of course. I still remember getting.
Can I tell you,
those.
this is why I can't remember the best gift, because we weren't allowed to have Nintendo.
Yeah.
We never got one, and then
All right, now you don't have to say that.
that's what I think, Mom. And then they said you can have one if you save up your money and buy your own.
That's such
So
cop-out.
me and my brother
I do it all the time.
saved our money, bought a Nintendo 64, and then we went in the basement one day, and there was an old Nintendo that had been there the entire time. We're
Nice.
just like, what is going on? So now I have two of them.
Interesting. My best gift ever was a bike, and you may know about this, but it was a Schwinn Stingray bicycle, which was like a work of art. It's the bike that you get when you're like 10 years old.
You were
It was
that kid.
orange, yeah, it was awesome. I never got like the new best thing, but that year, for whatever reason, my parents did. And then I'll use this to transition. My worst Christmas gift ever was my grandmother bought me some, I wanted Star Trek communicator walkie-talkies. And she didn't get me that. She instead got me these walkie-talkies that were connected by a cord so that you could only be about 20 feet away from the person with the other walkie-talkie. And I was just like, well, what's going on? That was terrible.
I remember those
That's it.
Star
That's
Trek
a good one.
walkie-talkies, and man, they were really cool. My neighbor across the street had them. I wish I had them today. My worst gift ever was back when I was in, I would say, 6th grade, maybe 7th grade. This has got to be late 70s, I guess. I'm really bad at math. But everyone had the Mattel football game
Oh,
with the
yeah.
little dots.
Yeah,
And everybody had them except me, and this was the one thing I really wanted for Christmas. And what my parents got me was some knockoff Sears version that was terrible. It wasn't the same thing. In fact, I think it's still in my basement in the box in the styrofoam, never touched.
Parents make a mistake when they think they know better. It's absolutely true. Other
Note to
worst
self.
gifts out of anybody?
I get the worst gift every year. and it's Christmas in Indiana.
Oh, we can't top that.
The reason is my family is all on the West Coast,
Yeah.
and my parents live 20 minutes from my sister and her family, and across the Puget Sound from my grandfather and my aunt, and so they all have Christmas together,
Yeah.
and here I am, 2,500 miles away. Yep. And with two daughters, it's cost $2,000 minimum just to fly to the West Coast for Christmas. So, my favorite memories are with my family, and I don't. Yeah. I'm making new memories now with my daughters and my wife, but it's just.
It's a sacrifice.
It's not the same.
Yeah. How about for you?
I wouldn't call this the worst present I've got. It's weird, and it's a family thing. And I know my uncle's one of the only people who listen.
I don't know if I like where this story's going.
But I don't, because I don't even know where this tradition came from. But every year when we have like the bigger family thing, or not Thanksgiving, Christmas, we have these stockings. There's always stocking junk in there, but there's always a roll of Scotch tape. And I don't know why.
You know what I think it is? I've actually heard this before. We don't do it, but I've heard that tradition. I'm not making a joke now. That is to make up for all the Scotch tape that was used to wrap the gifts that year, and that's what you're supposed to use the next year.
If you listen, send me an email or a text and let me know.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to know. But there's always but the real worst gift is like, when you're a kid, like you get like socks and underwear. Mm-hmm. The last time you get underwear and you realize you're too old for your mom to be buying you underwear, it's just an awkward time.
And that was last year for you, right?
I don't think it's happened yet.
No, I used to get a can of olives in my stocking every year.
I love olives.
And I love it. It was like the best thing. I'm a big fan of black olives, and
I agree with that.
It was great.
I also, while we're talking about gifts, we've got a gift exchange going here.
What?
Eston, are you able to do it?
Yeah, I got one over there.
All right, who are you giving a gift to?
I got Jim.
All right, what did you get, Jim? Tell us about it. Let's let him open it up.
I want him to unwrap.
Look at that beautiful wrapping
Quality,
paper. Did you do that yourself? Or did you take that
What is this?
Dynamite!
Season 1 and 2 of Good Times.
It's season 1 and 2 of the prototypical African American urban sitcom, Good Times,
Quintessential.
if you will.
I used to
what was
love
it?
that
Archetypical.
Jimmy Walker. It's awesome.
That's great. Now, is
Dynamite.
this something? Will you enjoy this? Will you
I will.
actually open this up and watch
I will.
it?
Maybe we'll watch this with my family every Sunday night.
we
We'll
go.
watch an episode of Good Times.
Next podcast.
I don't know if you can do it, but yeah, that's great. Jim, Turnabout's Fair Play.
I've got one here. I don't know if we can do this on the podcast, but there you go.
Tell us about it.
Baby frustration jar, quarter of strength for 100% dad. Rules: every time you get frustrated, stressed, or annoyed because of the baby, you have to pay for it. Oh, jeez. Put a quarter in the baby frustration jar. When baby Dickerson turns 1 year old, buy yourself the gift with the money in the jar.
Huh.
Awesome. You might need to
that's
upgrade your
nice.
jar. That's pretty cool.
Nice
you, sir.
job, Jim. I've got Bob. Here's my school paper wrapped
This is
gift.
really nice.
Yeah.
Courtesy of Washington Township. This is see, I've been waiting for this. This is a very old book. How to study and teach history. Now I can get started.
It's never too late to learn. What's the copyright on that?
Copyright 1893.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so there's. I wonder how much is still applicable today.
I'm looking for the MYP chapter in here. It might take me a minute to find this. Well, thank you very much for this. This is that's something I can use. I have a gift for you. Now you're a government teacher.
I try to be.
And you're an excellent government teacher. I know that you have pictures around your room of political leaders, cultural leaders, in order for your students to have someone to look forward to.
Wow.
And so I have a framed photograph for you to hang in your room. I know that you are a big fan of the political leader, Gary Hart.
I
And
am.
so
That is
what
awesome.
What I have for you is a photograph of Gary Hart.
This is the prototypical
Prototypical.
picture of Gary Hart. What was her name?
That's,
Donna
Rice.
Donna Rice.
Now
That's awesome.
Now this is all MYP. I want you to know because Gary Hart does possess a lot of the MYP characteristics. For instance, he's a risk taker.
He certainly is.
As you can see, he's caring. You can tell by the way he is holding Donna Rice. He's open-minded, and he's obviously balanced because he's sitting there perched on the risky
nice.
business with Donna Rice on his.
Well, it was Monkey Business, right? Because it's like the monkeys hanging
Oh, it's the
from it.
monkey business. It was monkey business. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Merry Christmas.
All right, well, we're probably near the end of our time, so let's do the one thing for sure that we said we were going to do. We're going to go head-to-head with Lethal Weapon and Die Hard, and then if there are other things that you guys want to talk about, we can do it, but it's like after 4 o'clock already. So let's take a moment here. Jim, Die Hard or Lethal Weapon, choose one, tell us why.
To me, it's easily Die Hard.
Okay.
It's easily Die Hard. I like the man. It's one man taking on the institution, taking on everything. He has something to lose.
Yeah.
He's got his ex-wife,
Yeah.
his family. He has everything to lose, and he fights to the end. It's got Reginald Val Johnson. Is that Reginald Val Johnson, right?
Yep.
How that guy plays a cop in all these movies and on TV.
That's right, I was going to say. Family Matters. He's
Yeah.
he's
Carl
awesome.
was in that movie.
Urkel.
Yeah, oh yeah, he's the main guy.
Yeah.
You have got to see
I've
the
never
movie.
seen it.
All right, so
Oh,
Eston can't play because
boy.
he's never
Yeah, I've
seen
seen
Die
it.
Hard. But there is not. Okay, I'll go ahead.
Wait, what?
Exactly.
Sorry.
There is not one thing wrong with the movie Die Hard. Everything that Jim said is absolutely true, and he didn't even mention that there is a version of Mr. Joshua that is Boris or what's his name? The ballet dancer. Goodenough. Alexander Goodenough. He is amazing.
With the long-haired blonde.
With the long-haired blonde guy, he is amazing. And then you've got Alan Rickman as the main villain, who is off the chart, perhaps one of the best cinematic villains ever.
An exceptional thief.
Which way do you go?
Oh, yeah, it's Die Hard.